an opportunity for a Kiddush club to get their own scotches out of Scotland? Yes, that is something we're going to dive into this episode of the Jewish Drinking Show, bringing L'chaim to life. Welcome everybody to a very special episode of the Jewish Drinking Show. I'm your host, Rabbi Drew Kaplan. I'm joined by first-time guest Yossi Francus. Yossi, welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We are talking here about these two bottles that came out this year. Came out in 2022, I should say.
Yes, this
came to you in summer 2022.
Yes.
They are interesting. They are, well, you know what? We should probably start drinking, then we can talk about them, right?
Okay.
But while we do that, do you want to share anything about yourself biographically?
Born in New York, lived there many years. Lived in Boston 11 years.
Mm-hmm.
About 20 years ago, came to Cincinnati.
You labeled them as Cincinnati Kiddush Club, which is already really interesting and humorous and funny, and we'll get to that in a moment.
Okay.
But this first one that we're starting off with, both of them are from Bruichladdich. It's a distillery out in the island of Islay.
Yep.
And so this first one, aged in bourbon casks. Bourbon cask matured for 16 years. So what is the story behind these two bottles?
So back in the early 2000s.
By the way, L'chaim.
Okay.
Baruch atah Adonai le'melchem she'akol niheh b'varo.
So back in the early 2000s, a number of the distilleries in Scotland were running deals in which you could buy a barrel that they would then essentially fill for you and keep for as long as you wanted, essentially. Ideally, you could even ask them to bottle it a little at a time. Two of us who wanted to do this were actually huge Springbank fans. Big enough fans that when they started their members club or whatever it was, our membership numbers were in 2 digits.
Oh, wow.
Now, they've revamped it all, so I have no idea what my membership number is, but we are certainly among the very first to join them.
Wow.
And Springbank did have it on offer, but by the time we got around to signing up for it, it was too late. They didn't have it anymore.
Wow.
And so we discovered that Bruichladdich also had it, and decided that we would go ahead and buy 2 casks, and we got 5 other people to go in with us.
This was back 2005, 6, 7?
No, this would have been 2002, 3, or 4.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. This is way back.
Yeah, it probably goes back maybe 20 years, maybe 19.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So even though one says 15, one says 16 years, this was, I guess they needed to, how did that work?
So my guess is we did it probably in 04, and then they distilled it on whatever schedule they had in 05 and 06.
Gotcha.
Is what I would guess would happen.
You mentioned other distilleries, Islay, elsewhere, or Springbank were doing these sorts of programs. Was the state of 20 years ago Scotch not the way it is now in its popularity, in its demand? Were these revenue boosters essentially for these distilleries?
Probably. I mean, let me just give you an example.
Yeah.
When I started drinking Springbank 21, it was back in the mid-90s.
Oh, wow.
And at the time, I was paying $360 for a case of 6.
That is mind-blowingly insane.
Right. Now, if
you couldn't get one for probably that much, right?
No, if you can find one now for under $500, you're actually doing pretty well. And it also depends on when. So it depends on, has Springbank released a 21-year-old in the last year or 2?
Wow.
And if they have, then prices are obviously going to be lower, unless you want some of those specific ones bottled in the 90s or something like that.
Wow.
So I don't know when that became a cult favorite and completely disappeared from the market, because when a 21-year-old disappears, you usually don't have another 21-year-old just to put out there. You have to wait until something is 21 years old.
I do remember years ago, maybe a few years ago, coming across a New Yorker article about specifically Bruichladdich, how turn of the century they were struggling, or were maybe the gates had been shuttered, and it sort of was reopened maybe around 97, 2000-ish.
Yes, I think that's true. I don't remember.
So I don't know if it was new ownership and they were trying to, dust off the mothballs, so to speak, of the distillery.
Potentially. Yeah. I mean, the places like McAllen never had a problem. Right? Some of those. And I don't think Springbank specifically had a problem, but it was a nice promotion. But then some of the others clearly, we're trying to drum up new and innovative ways to get
revenue and sales.
Or interest. So, for example, we paid $3,600 for the 2 casks. So we paid $1,800 per cask.
How much did that yield?
So we each got about just under 80 bottles apiece from both casks.
Oh, wow.
So it yielded about just under 500 bottles total.
Overall?
Yeah.
So 500 bottles for, what did you say, 3,600?
So we paid $3,600 for the casks, which of course comes out to $5 a bottle, but it's not that simple. The point is that
but do you have to also pay for bottling and shipping?
Yeah, that came later.
Okay.
But the point is, back then, $1,800 wasn't, or $3,600 wasn't generating a whole lot of revenue for them. It was more a case of generating interest. I think than actual revenue, because the amount was not that significant.
I can't. Do they offer that today? I can't imagine them doing it.
They do not. Nobody offers it, as far as I know.
Yeah, because demand in the last 15, 20 years has shot up.
Yes. Yeah. Since then,
they can do the revenue on their own terms.
Yeah. Since then, right. So, for example, I think a 15-year-old straight Bruichladdich now starts at about $150 or $160. Now,
because the 10-year-old part Charlotte already is, I don't know, $80
or $90.
Yeah.
Yes. So no, we had to pay for bottling, and then we had to pay for the import fee, and for the duty on it.
Oh, wow.
Now, we got lucky because...
did you pay what you had paid? Meaning, if they're charging those tariffs and all those other things, but it's against the 3,600.
No. That was just for the cask.
No, I'm saying if they're going to charge you tariffs and all these other things.
They're not charging it. The U.S. government is.
Yeah. But are they charging on... It's
an alcohol tax.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's not the distillery that's charging that.
Right, but are they charging, like here, they charge taxes, it's against the, a percentage of the money. So do they charge that, or is it by volume?
I do not know how the U.S. government figures this out. I think it has to do actually by, by percent of alcohol.
Okay.
Is what I believe it is, more than anything else.
Okay. Alcohol so basically total alcohol by volume content, essentially.
Right. So for example, if you come into the United States with a couple of cases of wine, and you declare it because legally you need to, and you don't want to be caught not declaring it.
Yeah.
So often what I have found is if I go and declare it, they simply wave me through. And it was once explained to me that the actual duty on it is less on the cost of the bottle, but the alcohol content. And it's just not worth their time to calculate what the duty on these 2 cases would be.
So it's better just to declare them.
It's just a case of you declare it, they let you go, and if you don't declare it, that's where you get into trouble because they can fine you for that.
But if you're bringing, just be above board, honest, and legal. It's great.
Yeah. Now, if you're bringing 40 cases of this, that might be a different problem.
Yeah, that'll flag.
But in any case, we calculated, and this was below what we thought it would be, that with the initial investment of the $3,600, and then the import fee, we had to find a distributor to do this, right? Because you can't just, in the U.S., you can't just import it.
So how did you find the distributor?
They've had people they worked with. So we said, fine, you worked with them, we'll use them. Yeah. And we used someone fairly close, I think. I do not know who. Okay. And the import taxes and stuff, we probably paid just under $40 a bottle. So it was a pretty good deal anyway.
You paid under 40, you're saying everything overall?
My cost for my 80 bottles overall.
Yes, and that includes the tariffs, the importing,
everything
was $40.
Inclusive. Was about $3,000.
Not bad.
Which is under $40 a bottle. Which is a pretty good deal.
Yeah, especially for 16, 15-year age statements. It's
you had to wait 20 years for it, but
yes, it's a lot of patience. Yes. I will say, having moved here 4.5 years ago, having heard multiple times those first 2-3 years, have you heard of these guys? They've put it, and I was like, okay, fine. And in my mind, it would never happen. And then finally half year ago they came out, so that's incredible.
I did.
And they're real.
Yes, yes.
And I should add tasty.
You can actually taste them.
Yeah, and actually they're quite full of flavor, robustness. They're both cask strength. Was that a choice? I mean, this one we're drinking clocks in at 60.7% ABV
It's
and
close.
62.4. So how did you, was that a decision to do cask strength versus a watered down version? And
So-
watered down could even be 50%.
So I think the deal was for cask strength,
Okay.
as I recall correctly.
Because you could always water down.
And you can always cut it.
Yeah.
Which doesn't, even though this is that strong, you don't really have to cut it.
Yeah, it is very drinkable.
But it does open up. It does open up actually if you put a little bit of water in it.
Hey there. I hope you're enjoying this episode so far with Yossi Francus on these scotches. I wanted to break in and give you a sneak peek into next week's episode featuring Professor Sasha Stern.
The act of pouring wine on the altar is also a Jewish Israelite form of worship. Important to make the point. And the similarity of this act with the pagan act of libation is something which could potentially be disturbing to the rabbis.
I hope you enjoy that sneak peek into next week's episode featuring Professor Stern. Now back to this episode with Yossi Francus. Slight historical context, but not to get too into the weeds.
Go into it.
For people who might be less familiar,
Right.
is that this was all done at a particular synagogue that had, unsurprisingly, as synagogues go, a breakaway. a little over a decade ago, a breakaway synagogue. I know it's the most common and cliche thing ever, and yet it happened. So you're talking about, even though you attend a synagogue with me that is the breakaway, but the shul from which it broke away had this Kiddush club going. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
And
What was that Kiddush club like?
like most of them, you go out somewhere in the middle of services when you're bored and, have a couple of drinks and some food.
Okay.
The group that actually bought it, into it,
Yeah.
was people who were in it. And when they actually asked us, how do you want to label it? What organization?
Oh.
That's what came to mind.
Do you have any intentions or plans of serving these at any Kiddush clubs?
It's been done.
You're guilty. Okay.
Yes.
You can check off the box.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can check off the box.
It has been, yes, faithfully served at a Kiddush club.
Even the sherry one has been, although that's unofficial.
It's unofficial. Well, you had a lawn Kiddush for a lot of the pandemic.
I did. I did. On the other hand,
There was no Kiddush club with the pandemic. Yeah.
these hadn't yet come into the U.S. at the time.
You're right.
And they probably would not have been a regular feature.
Kiddush clubs are typically not under the aegis or necessarily imprimatur or acceptance of any particular given synagogue rabbi.
Exactly.
Yes, so it happens anyways.
It does.
It happens anyways.
And the wise ones just
Yes.
don't make a big deal out of it.
Yes. Actually, you know what? Can I go on a tangent? Speaking
Sure.
of Kiddush clubs, and obviously you labeled this as Cincinnati Kiddush Club. There's a certain distinctness in place. What have your experiences been in other Kiddush clubs?
By and large, they're similar.
Yeah.
You have to know that one's taking place.
Mm-hmm.
And then you need to find out where and when.
Mm-hmm.
The important things.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say what they're serving, food.
Right. So all of them have some elements of probably some wine, and then some kind of alcohol along the lines of
Typically whiskey, Scotch usually.
bourbon, Scotch. Some do vodka.
Oh, and yeah.
Ice cold vodka. Some of them do that. And those are the kinds of things typically. Food's going to vary widely. Some places have massive spreads.
I've heard.
And, you actually have to contribute to belong to it. Right? So they take they take payment in kind, or they take payment in kind.
Yeah.
While others, like the one we have here, is more informal.
Going back to this model that you picked up on, so this is not something anybody can go to a Scotch distillery, Islay or otherwise. Was this just a first decade of the 21st century offering?
As far as I know, yes.
Yes. And a lot of that has to do with demand of Scotch?
Yeah, I mean, there is no point, unless you're a very new distillery, maybe. I can't imagine there's any point for the name brand or even not so name brand distilleries to go and do it, because sales are booming.
Yeah, I suspect that was just a special point in time, really.
Yeah.
Was that even done in the 90s? Or that really could have just been first decade of the 21st century?
So I think the 90s was just, still a sleepy time in that Americans specifically had not glommed onto Scotch in any big numbers.
Yeah, I don't think bourbon was big either in the 90s.
And then I think you started to get more interest, and they came up with these things in the early 2000s. And then stuff, I think sales exploded. I don't remember when, probably 2010,
I need to do research.
12. I mean, they probably took a hit in 2008. And I don't know if they boomed before and then came down. I don't have that data.
I didn't start getting into bourbon really until 2012, 2013. And already then it had already started growing, but really the last 5-10 years, that has been an explosion.
Yes.
And that's all whiskeys anywhere.
The bourbon explosion came after the Scotch.
Really?
If you walked into stores and liquor stores, the best liquor stores in New York, Chicago, LA, going back, say, call it 10 years ago, you would see a plethora of Scotches. And in most of them, you would see the name brand, the mainstream bourbons, right? So you'd see Maker's Mark,
Jim Beam, Jim Williams.
You see Woodford. Back then, because before it became an absolute cult favorite, you'd even see Pappy 90s. Okay, yes, I know.
That's crazy. I mean, I will say even 10 years ago, I would see Blanton's on the shelves.
Right.
And Blanton's was fine until it disappeared.
Yes. You see it sometimes.
Yeah.
But even Pappy's you could get 15 years ago, mostly by walking into a store that carried bourbons.
Wow.
But you didn't see the same kind of selection of bourbons as you might now.
Wow.
Right? And of course, the caveat is I don't include Cincinnati, because in Cincinnati, obviously,
we're right across the river.
Cincinnati and these environs don't count in that sense.
Yeah.
Because, it's, how do you call it? It's the local alcohol.
Yeah.
Effectively.
Well, we're one of the two main centers of distilling in the entire world for whiskey.
Yes.
It's like, let's have bourbon in England. Like, it just doesn't do as, or Scotland even. So it's like having Scotch here.
Right, but if you walk into, a good liquor store, and especially the larger metropolitan areas, you will see significant selections of bourbon now, and that happened after Scotch.
Not infrequently, people come up to me and say, hey, have you ever tried this? Or have you ever drank that? And oftentimes I'll say, okay, either I have or haven't, and it definitely generates an interesting conversation. But I haven't really figured out what to do with that, where to put that, those suggestions, those advice, those recommendations of drinks or beverages to consume. So I figured, you know what? Why not channel it? Put it here into the Jewish Drinking Show, because maybe other people's suggestions might bring enlightenment and enhancement to your own drinking life. Now back into the show. The other one was a 16-year bourbon cask matured, and this one is matured in a sherry cask for 15 years. And clearly the color is already quite, I mean, this was more of a straw color. This is definitely a reddishly tinged.
Yeah, I mean, it's caramel colored. And, it's clear when you look at the bottles, even if you didn't see the label.
Yeah, you can't mix them up.
You would know which one is the sherry cask.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear.
Yeah. The nose definitely carries a more significant more depth than the bourbon aged one.
It does.
Just on the nose.
Yes.
Complexity. There's nothing. I mean, I don't find anything wrong with this one, but this adds.
Yeah, I'm curious what you think, and I will then describe to you the first time I had each of them what I thought.
I could live with the nose alone. I mean, that is. I mean, the first one, it tastes fine. The nose just isn't exciting. This is an exciting nose. All right. Well, L'chaim to this one. A lot. There's definitely a lot. The thing that I am a huge fan of is mouthfeel. It almost in a way feels softer. That's not what I'm sure no one else thinks about. I mean, it might be an afterthought because the flavors really are quite more, I don't know, ruby-esque.
Robust.
Yes. I don't know. So what were your thoughts when you first had them?
So when I first had it, I had the bourbon cask first.
I think that's the way they should be had.
And
I can't imagine going this way than having
that makes no sense.
No, yeah.
And similar to what you said, nice nose, excellent Scotch.
Yeah.
If someone offered it to me, I certainly wouldn't throw it away. It's a very, very good Scotch. And then I had the one in the sherry cask, and it blew it away.
Yeah, it's night and day.
They did a really nice job with this.
Yes.
But the sherry cask is just out of this world.
Yeah, I'm not dumping in any way on this, but this is head and shoulders above.
Right.
Yeah.
It's got, as you pointed out, that taste in the mouth, and then it's got that explosive aftertaste.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. The finish is spicy and long lasting.
Yeah.
There's more liveliness, some floral notes, more robustness throughout.
Yes.
Not only the nose, but palate.
All of it.
And you're right. The finish is long lasting, spicy, and it lingers.
Yes.
It's almost a cinnamony-esque of a spice. Mm-hmm. That is really fun.
What we are trying is an experiment.
Yeah.
In that one of the people in the group has a client who distills bourbon. He bought from them a cask. A number of us have each taken a case of 6 of each of these. Mm-hmm. And we've mixed and poured them into this cask. Mm-hmm. And we're just letting it age.
Wow. That should be a really interesting experiment.
Yeah.
Do you know expectations on years? How long?
Oh, we're going to put a spigot on.
Oh, okay.
And we'll just take it out when we want.
That'll be good.
That's the beauty of having a cask in a cellar in a basement is we can essentially take it anytime we want. We don't have to bottle 500 bottles all at the same time.
That's fair.
And so it's
you could do it every year.
Well,
this is after 1 year, this is after 2 years, and then you can do a vertical tasting.
Right, but this is cool because this is after 17 years and after 18 years and after 19 years. If the angels share and we don't get too much of it, we could have a 50-year-old. Now
that's a lot of patience.
Well, our grandkids may have a 50-year-old. I don't know about us.
There you go.
It's in 30 years from now. Yeah, we could. You can actually get a sense of it by mixing them now.
We could definitely do that. Well, l'chaim to mixing these. Not as much of a fan, to be honest.
Okay.
I mean, it's weird because one thing I like about this is, you get a lot of those vanilla, a lot of the oak stuff out of the bourbon cask. This is really featuring the sherry. This feels just lost in its identity. It's not really sure what to do. It has kind of both. It's halfway pregnant, and it
in some ways. It also loses a lot of the nose of the sherry cask.
Yeah.
The bourbon
it loses
cask,
some of its identity.
The bourbon cask nose dominates.
Yeah.
But what's going to be interesting is having, again, this is a fly-by-night experiment, obviously. Marrying them together and aging them further in a cask will be fascinating to see what happens with it.
Yeah. I was also, once we're starting talking about experiments, I wonder if you change up ratios rather than 50-50 them, do whether it's 3-2 or 3-1, whatever it is.
We don't have enough casks to play that game with.
Well, with casks, but I'm saying even just on a mixing level, just here. I'm not saying for us in our recording to mix the ratios. I do like them on their own better than as a combination.
Right.
Hey there, I wanted to break in. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Actually, I hope you're enjoying all of the episodes, or at the very least, most of them. And if you haven't, and if this is your first episode, go check more of them out. But if you have been enjoying them, and if you enjoy the other resources that are shared at jewishdrinking.com, I hope you think about the opportunity of supporting the work that we do here and continue to do. Please feel free to visit jewishdrinking.com/donate, and you can help support the work and continue our mission and our vision of bringing l'chaims to life. Thank you so much, and now back into the show. Obviously, these are incredibly tasting and special opportunities for you, especially considering how relatively inexpensive they were, relative being, and you mentioned 15, 16-year-old Scotches from Islay importing to America would run over $100 easily per per bottle?
Yeah, I think we looked up that a 15-year-old Bruichladdich bourbon cask starts at about 150.
And would a sherry run higher?
Yeah, usually.
180. Oh wow, so 180. So relatively, you came out ahead. But unfortunately, you are not allowed to sell them. Correct. Unlike other current, it's interesting because I think about nowadays, people are able to do. They're able to pick out a cask and have it labeled, but that's bourbon distilleries.
Right.
Scotch, I imagine, like we were discussing earlier, by demand, they don't need that.
Exactly.
And so, but nevertheless, you cannot because you don't have a license to sell alcohol.
Well, there is that.
Okay.
I mean, people get around this all the time by selling stuff as collectibles.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, I don't know.
Nice workaround.
I don't know if eBay still allows selling of alcohol, but when they
I suspect not.
But when they did,
Yeah.
you were not selling alcohol, but you were selling a collectible.
Brilliant.
And that's the way they got around it.
My understanding is that you cannot get away these days with
Right.
that.
But, if one truly wanted to sell it,
Yeah.
there are clearly ways that, one could.
Yeah.
I just am under the impression that no one who actually has these actually wants to sell them.
Yeah. And they're not going to go bad anytime soon.
No, they're not. So if you want one of these, you have to become really good friends with them.
There we go. That's definitely a nice call to action. Hook up, hang out. Yes, reach out to me. We'll have them. Also, I mean, I imagine you can set obviously a whole bunch of them away, but maybe for special occasions, weddings, grandkids, etc. For probably really special occasions.
Well, yes.
And coming on the Jewish drinking show, of course, but.
I mean, when you have 40 bottles of each, right? Even with 40 bottles of each, you get bored. You want other things too.
Has it brought you pride? Actually, this is a strange question. I'm going to ask it anyways. Has it brought you pride? Part of your identity for over 15, perhaps even up to 20 years? Knowing this is something to look forward to, was the anticipation? Obviously, you were excited. You were anticipating it. Now that the anticipation is gone, how does it feel that the year has arrived there in your house?
It feels fun and cool more than anything else.
Yeah. And you're not going to go short on Scotch anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't know that we ever thought of it as our identity, but I guess it was so long that it kind of sometimes.
Did you actually go out to Scotland to scope out the Scotch?
No, but one of the people who is in the group was there twice.
Yeah.
And was able to visit the baby, so to speak.
That's lovely.
And they actually were able to tap one little bottle of each that he could take back without violating any of the of the duty of import or anything was. There were very specific regulations on what they could and couldn't do. But we had our first taste of them, I think in 2015 or 16.
Oh, okay.
We had a little.
They were probably about 10 years old.
And then we had a second sample, must have been in either fall of 18 or 19. So we had a little bit of an inkling of what they would be. But obviously, they matured clearly beyond that as well.
That's fantastic. Hey there, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. I know you might think that Jewish drinking only exists on podcasts, but guess what? It can be so much more. Have you ever wondered how to elevate an experience for your shul, JCC, other organizations, even businesses? I'm more than happy to chat to see how we can bring that to you. You can feel free to reach out to me at drew@jewishdrinking.com. We can see how I can help you bring l'chaims to life. You mentioned earlier, Yossi, about even being able to open the sherry but not really properly in shul. So clearly this will be an issue in certain shuls, bringing sherry cask, a matured Scotch, but not having the same level of difficulty challenge to that. I imagine a lot of shuls have an anti-sherry policy, non-sherry friendly policy.
Institutionally, yes.
Institutionally. Yes.
Yes, you'd be surprised how many rabbis of those shuls will drink it.
Right. It's one thing to set shul policy, but another to have it in their house. Yeah.
Exactly.
That makes sense. That's a whole separate conversation, which I totally need to have at some point.
So keep in mind that we actually had to sell it for Pesach.
Yeah. Oh, how did you do that?
And
You just claim it on your chametz sales forms?
Yeah, but not quite, because it's 5 time zones away.
So you just sell it earlier?
So it had to go in with the stuff that got sold like the night before. So that by the time it hit, the cutoff time in Scotland, it had already been sold. It would have been a shame to lose out on that. But the person who generally took care of the sales, one year it wasn't clear that he would be able to sell it.
Was that locally, or you sold it with someone in England or Scotland?
No. We sold it locally, but they have arrangements. They all have arrangements how to sell something that isn't. They may use the same person that they sell everything to, but they sell it parts of it the night before, or things like that, right? Because it's stuff you can't get to, so you don't care when they sell it. And I'm pretty sure that that's how they do it. But there was one year that...
That's a tricky workaround.
But it works.
Yeah, I know. Yes, but I was just thinking about selling the chametz. But yeah,
right. That the person who took care of all of the admin stuff for us, there was one year it wasn't clear that he would actually be able to sell it. So I went ahead and sold it. And in the end, he went ahead and sold it too. So we sold it twice. Fortunately, I believe it was sold to the same person. So we didn't have a case of double selling the chametz.
By the way, that is actually the origin of the institution of selling chametz in one's possession.
Yes, it was for
whiskey.
It was for the beer makers.
It was for whiskey, specifically whiskey.
Was it? I thought it was the beer makers.
No. It was whiskey specifically.
Right. Because of their livelihood.
Yeah, so that's something that Rabbi Yoel Circus, the new house by Kiddush, wrote about. He says, so many of us Jews are engaged commercially with whiskey these days. It's impossible we need to sell it, even though it's in our own houses. So that was really, it used to be when you sold your chametz, it would go to the physical domain ownership of the Gentile. But with whiskey, it was impractical to move all of that whiskey. It was a lot to move. So that was a new halachic innovation because of whiskey into halakha.
Right, but selling chametz goes way, way back.
It goes way back to early rabbinic times, but that was, you would actually sell the chametz and it would go into someone else's physical domain. With whiskey, it was impractical to actually move all of that whiskey into other people's houses. So that was the rabbinic workaround. You know what? For whiskey, we'll allow you to keep it in your house, but still sell it to the Gentiles.
Right. See, I was under the impression that in Talmudic times they were selling the beer, because that was one of the main livelihoods as well.
I don't know if it was a main livelihood. Definitely
but
certain rabbis.
Livelihood.
Rav Papa. Although a lot of their beer was not. I would say minority of their beer seemingly was not from grains.
So it wouldn't matter.
It would have been primarily dates. So actually, that is the only time beer ever is mentioned in the Mishnah is to point out in Pesachim that has certain other people's types of beer has grains. We don't use grain beer. So dates.
Right.
Meanwhile, they do mention in the Talmud, what about wheat beer, this beer? So it was a variety, and probably just depended where they were.
Right.
They would do that. But yeah, whiskey really was the catalyst for that halachic innovation of selling chametz within one's domain. It's just so many Jews were engaged commercially with whiskey.
And then, of course, it expanded that no one took anything to...
Right, so then from whiskey, it just was the
rest of it...
slippery slope to other stuff that we probably could move out of our house.
Lock it away in the cabinet.
Yossi, this has been fantastic. This has been enjoyable. This is incredibly tasty. Is there anything you would like to promote?
There is not.
Okay, well, that's fair. That's very fair. All right, well, Yossi, this has been fantastic. This has been wonderful. This has been incredibly flavorful and l'chaim. All right.